Coco. Hey, Coco. Coco. Hey, Coco, what are you doing with the magnifying glass? Oh, hi, boys and girls. It's so good to see you this morning. I didn't know you were there. Are you ready for our lesson? Great. Well, let's start by asking Coco, what is doing with the magnifying glass? Oh, Coco heard that we can find God in all things. So he was using a magnifying glass to find God. Do we need a magnifying glass to find God? Coco, we can see God in all things, can't we? Where can we find God? Do you remember our story from last week? How do we know where God is? Yeah, every time that somebody is kind to us, we know that God is inside of them, right? And every time we hear a bird sing or a frog croak or look at the pretty flowers, then we know that God's a part of all of that. He thinks it's pretty cool that we don't need a magnifying glass to find God. So, who can remind Coco of our affirmation? Do you guys remember it? There is no spot where God is not. You want to say that with me? There is no spot where God is not. He's in each and every one of us. So today we're going to start with a little prayer for our meditation time. Let's say goodbye to Coco for just a minute, okay? Bye, Coco. We'll see you later, okay? So for our meditation time, we're going to say a little prayer, okay? And I think you've heard this before. So let's close our eyes and take a few deep breaths. So I'm going to say a prayer, okay? And you can listen. The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me. Wherever I am, God is. And so it is. Amen. So when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Isn't that a great prayer? Wherever we are, God is. So who remembers a story from last week? Remember? It was Where Does God Live? Hope. It was a story about hope called Where Does God Live? So let's read the story again, okay?
Where Does God Live? By Holly B. Illustrated by Kim Howard. This is Hope. She's a lot like you. She loves her puppy and the color blue. She likes to laugh and play and sing, but asking questions is her favorite thing. Where does the sun go? Why does it rain? Why don't snowflakes all look the same? There were so many things Hope wanted to know, such as how many colors are in a rainbow. She'd ask her friends and her mom and dad, her grandmother Rose and her big brother Brad, the mailman, the grocer, and nice Mrs. Ying. She'd ask anyone about any old thing. One day, a new question popped into her head, and she asked her mom, who was making the bed, "Where does God live? Does God live nearby?" Hope, God lives in heaven, way up in the sky. Now, Hope hadn't heard about heaven before, but she knew that she wanted to learn a lot more. So she went to the meadow to have a few words with sweet Mrs. Peep, her favorite bird. Have you seen heaven way up in the sky? Have you ever seen God when you fly far and high? I've seen clouds and stars and skies of blue, the moon and rainbows and lightning too. I've never seen heaven, though I've flown far and near. But the sky is so lovely, God has to live here. Hope thanked Mrs. Peep and went down to the stream to see Mr. Frog, who was chubby and green. "Where does God live?" she asked Mr. Frog. He looked up and smiled as he sat on his log. "Look at the flowers, the wide open spaces, the trees and the butterflies, those beautiful places. To me, this is almost like heaven, you see. That's how I know that God lives here with me." All of a sudden, and quick as a flash, Mrs. Fish jumped up high and came down with a splash. "Oh, no, that's not true. That can't really be. I know that God lives in the stream here with me. The crystal blue water is lovely, I know. God lives here with me in the waters below." Hope thanked her friends and went on her way to hear what her grandmother might have to say. Her grandmother was wise and her heart very pure, and she'd know the answer of that Hope was sure. "Does God live in heaven or down by the stream? Does God live in the water or is God a dream? Tell me, where does God live? I really must know. Oh, please won't you tell me, my sweet Grandma Rose?" Her grandmother smiled as grandmothers can, and softly she reached out for Hope's little hand. "I know you're confused, and I'm glad that you came. Now listen real close, and I'll try to explain. You know God made everything, seen and unseen, the wind and the sun and the meadows so green, flowers and stars and oceans of blue, trees, birds and rocks, and all people too. And when God makes a person, a star or a wave, a part of God stays with whatever God's made. So God lives in the sky, in the meadow and stream. God lives everywhere, and God isn't a dream. God lives in the frogs and the birds and in you. When you're looking for God, it's easy to do. God lives in all things that you see, hear, or touch. God lives in all people. God's in each one of us. And when you meet people who are loving and good, they're letting God out just as everyone could. And if you meet people who seem hateful or bad, they've forgotten God's here. That makes God sad. God is gentle and loving and cares for us all. God gives us the strength to get up when we fall. God is always around to help us find truth, whether we're old or still in our youth. God's your best friend, Hope. God really cares. So make sure every day to take time for your prayers. How should I pray, Grandma? What should I say? I want God to hear me. What's the best way? Her grandmother hugged her and said, "Precious you, just speak from your heart, Hope. It's easy to do. Tell God your wishes, your fears, and your dreams. Then thank God for all of your favorite things. Ask God to guide you in all that you do, and be thankful for all of the love God sends you." Hope kissed Grandma Rose and went on her way. She had no more questions, at least for that day. And on her way home, she saw God in all things, in the clouds and the flowers, and in nice Mrs. Ying. And later that night, when Hope went to bed, she closed her eyes slowly and bowed down her head. Dear God, thank you so much for this wonderful day. Thanks for the friends who showed me the way. Please help me tomorrow in all that I do. And don't forget, God, how much I love you. The end.
Wow, I love that story. The second time I heard it, just as much as the first time. So who remembers what happened in the story? Who did Hope talk to when she was wondering where God lives? Do you know, Coco? That's right, Mrs. Peep is one. And who else? Mr. Frog. Do you remember Mr. Frog? He was on the log. And Hope also asked Mrs. Fish. Remember, Mrs. Fish was in the water and thought that God is like the water because the water is so beautiful. And Hope also asked Mrs. Peep, the bird. Mrs. Peep was flying through the air, and God was like the heaven, because the heaven is so wonderful and just so freeing up there. Yeah, she also asked her mother and her grandma Rose. So what kind of places did Hope visit when she was asking all these people? Yeah, she was in the forest where Mrs. Peep was, and like I said before, in the by the stream where Mrs. Frog was, and where Mrs. Fish was, and Mr. Frog. So what kind of things help us know that God is around? Yeah, when people are kind to each other, we know that God is in them, right? When people are helping us, when we help each other, God's a part of that. God's a part of us whenever He's always a part of us. And He especially shines through whenever we help each other and are nice to each other. So when can you talk to God during your day? Anytime, right? All the time. We can talk to Him when we say grace before we eat our food, before a meal. We can talk to God and say a prayer. We can talk to God when we first wake up and thank Him for a good night's sleep and thank Him in advance for a wonderful day we're going to have. And then, of course, we can talk to Him in the evenings when we say goodnight before we go to bed. So here's one thing that Hope's grandma said. And when you meet people who are loving and good, they're letting God out, just as everyone should. So what ways can you let God out this week? Yeah, when you're helping your mother out, then that's God is helping you to help your mother with chores, right? And when you're nice to your friends, then that's a way that God is shining through you. When we're nice to each other. So how do other people let God out? How do other people let God out? Yeah, when your mom, she cooks healthy food for you, that's a part of God as well, isn't it? When other people do nice things for you. When you go to the store and they help you with your groceries, that's a way that people help you too. Of course, our animals are part of God too, aren't they? We just love our animals. So boys and girls, I hope you guys have a great week ahead of you. So next week, Mr. Noe is going to give you the lesson. Do you remember Mr. Noe? He's a pretty cool guy. So he'll be here next week. So me and Coco are going to say goodbye, and we'll see you soon, okay? Bye-bye. We love you.